You might think you already know the story of Christmas, that it's an ancient Christian festival now drowned in commercial excess. Yet something about that picture never quite fits. Because if that is the whole story, why is its protagonist a jolly fat man in a big red suit, driving a sleigh pulled by flying reindeer? These are not Christian images, and they're not modern inventions either. So, what are they? And where do these images come from? The answers go back further than you think. And once you see where these patterns come from, you may never look at Father Christmas, or his reindeer, the same way again. Hi everybody, and welcome back to Beasts of the Old World. I'm Nick, and welcome to this Christmas special episode. A like and a comment would be welcomed with reckless festive abandon, and stick around to the end, because I have more presents coming your way. And with that said, let's get into it. For as long as I can remember, there's always been the annual complaint that Christmas isn't what it used to be, that the true meaning has been lost somehow, that it used to be a Christian festival that's now been ruined by consumerism, that Santa used to be green and only turned red because of Coca, and so on and so forth. Now, I don't think anyone would argue that Christmas is becoming increasingly materialistic. After all, you only have to watch an early 2000s clip of shoppers on Black Friday to know this side of the festival can bring out the worst in people. But something about this appraisal of Christmas has never sat right with me, because Christmas is my favourite time of the year, and I'm neither Christian nor particularly materialistic. It's not so much the Christian imagery that enchants me as the twinkling Christmas trees in everybody's window, the wreaths upon the doors, sticking the fire on when it's cold and dark outside, and spending some time with family. So I began to wonder, what does Christianity have to do with Christmas trees, those twinkling lights, or, for that matter, a jolly fat man in a big red suit, or, of course, with flying reindeer? For Father Christmas, at least, the usual story begins with St. Nicholas. He was the Bishop of Myra, famed for his generosity, protection of the vulnerable, and his many miraculous deeds. Around the year 1500, St. Nicholas began to morph into the figure of Santa Claus in the Netherlands, and then, in 1823, Clement Clarke Moore's poem A Visit from St. Nicholas added the sleigh and gave the reindeer standardised names, and then a very familiar picture emerged. And for most people, that's the whole story. But it isn't. The story of Christmas goes back much further than St. Nicholas, much further even than the birth of the baby Jesus in Nazareth. But of course it's about Jesus, right? That's why it's on the 25th of December. That's his birthday, right? Wrong. Most historians agree that Jesus was almost certainly not born in December. Strong reconstruction, based on the Gospel of Luke, places the Nativity in early autumn. For one thing, the story of the Nativity describes shepherds watching their flocks in the fields by night, but December nights in the Judean highlands were very cold and very wet, so sheep were usually kept under the cover from around November to March. Luke's Gospel also tells us that Zechariah, father of John the Baptist, is informed by the angel Gabriel of his wife's imminent pregnancy while he was in temple service, which according to historically verifiable records, fell in late June. The same gospel tells us that Jesus is conceived 6 months later, in December or early January. Count forward 9 months and you arrive in September, which is when Jesus was most likely to have really been born. So why celebrate Christmas on the 25th of December if it's almost certainly not when Jesus was born? Well, some early Christian thinkers believed that great prophets died on the same day they were conceived. The death of Jesus is widely believed to have taken place on the 25th of March. If his conception was also on that date, then 9 months later his birthday would have been the 25th of December. This, however, is a heavily contested theory given that there are very few explicit references to this belief in the Bible. But if that's not the reason, then what is? Interestingly, at the time of Christianity's surging popularity through the Roman Empire, there was already a festival in place around this date, the festival of Saturnalia, which ran from the 17th to the 23rd of December and ended with Sigillaria, which was a day dedicated to the giving of gifts. Sol Invictus, the festival of the unconquered sun, one of the most badass names for a festival ever, was added to the Roman calendar in AD 274, and this festival fell, you guessed it, on the 25th of December. The truth is that this iconic date has nothing at all to do with the birth of Jesus. It was already a significant date in other calendars all around the world, sitting at the emotional and symbolic heart of Midwinter. The real reason Christmas takes place at the end of December is because this is when festivals of the winter solstice take place. The winter solstice marks the nadir of the year, the longest night, the point when darkness seems to overtake the world. Even today, with our brightly lit streets and warm homes, we still feel the power of the unrelenting darkness of winter. I can only imagine what it must once have been like. Is it any wonder that for ancient communities who lived at the mercy of weather, hunger, and cold, this was the moment that demanded ritual, light, and collective reassurance? Midwinter festivals arose from a psychological need to confront the fear and uncertainty that winter brought with it, through light, generosity, and the hope that the sun would return. Now, those familiar with Christianity will know that Jesus is often described as the light of the world. Whether or not this description came independent of the solar festivals he would later share a day with, I can't say, but placing his birth at the rebirth of the sun was certainly very symbolically powerful. This may well explain why Christmas falls where it does, but it doesn't explain where so much of the imagery of our modern Christmas comes from. What do flying reindeer have to do with Jesus? Nothing. What have flying reindeer got to do with Imperial Rome? Nothing. What have flying reindeer got to do with festivals of the sun? Well, if we leave the Middle East and Central Europe for the moment and head into the far north, we find that our modern Christmas imagery starts to make much more sense. Here we find numerous midwinter festivals, each one more revealing than the last. The first you will probably have heard of, and that is Yule, a Germanic midwinter festival now broadly accepted as the spiritual precursor to Christmas. Its exact pre-Christian dates are uncertain because it wasn't a single holy day, but a whole season of feasting and coming together at the turning of the year. But aside from eating and drinking and gathering together, it was also a festival of light and darkness, and of blood and sacrifice. Families slaughtered animals for the winter table, raised toasts to their gods and to their ancestors, and lit fires against the longest nights. Evergreen branches, shared ale, and the blaze of the Yule log worked as symbols of community and continuity, symbols that said life would persist even when the land lay frozen all around you. You have to understand that winter back then was not like it is now. There was no central heating, no double-glazed windows, insulation was poor or non-existent, and food might be scarce or non-existent. Yule wasn't so much a ritual as a collection of practical acts of communal solidarity in a climate where winter could, and often did, decide who would live and who would die. It expressed a very simple truth about the world. When things became dark, cold, and precarious, people survived through sharing warmth, sharing food, and sharing light. While modern Christmas isn't often about survival, the communal feasting and the seasonal goodwill and generosity that were integral to Yule survive as pillars of modern Christmas today. If we step back from Yule and look across the whole northern belt of the world, the pattern widens. All across Scandinavia, the Baltic, Siberia, and the Arctic North, we find stories that revolve around the same ideas. We find sky-travelling beings crossing the dark night skies. We hear of gifts or vital forces descending from above. There are ancestor herds moving through the heavens and spirit animals watching over the living. One figure of particular interest is the Reindeer Mother, a great winter doe who leads a cosmic reindeer herd across the sky, carrying the light of the sun itself in her antlers as she guides it through the long nights of the winter. In some stories, her antlers were also said to hold a secret star that would guide lost travellers home. Among the Sami, this idea takes on a clearer, more personal shape in the figure of Beaivi, the deity of the returning sun. Now, as I'm sure you already know, in the far north the sun can disappear below the winter horizon for weeks at a time. Svalbard in Norway is famously where you'll find the world's northernmost permanently inhabited town, and apart from being home to armoured, talking polar bears, it experiences the polar night for almost 4 months of the year, from late October to mid-February. No sun for 4 months. Beaivi brings it back, travelling through the sky in an enclosure of reindeer antlers and bones with her daughter Beaivi Njeda. Families would smear butter on their door frames, which would melt in the sun, to feed and strengthen her as she climbed higher into the sky. They would also tie brightly coloured ribbons, and they made sun rings out of leaves, both rituals with clear modern counterparts that exist today. So much of the modern Christmas imagery can be found here in this ancient solar goddess of the far north, yet in Lithuania, the return of light at midwinter was imagined on an even grander scale through Saule, who, unsurprisingly at this point, was another sun goddess. She crossed the sky each day in a golden cart or sleigh, drawn by tireless horses and, in seasonal songs, by horned deer. At night, she travelled across the cosmic sea in a gold or silver boat. Folk songs describe Saule casting gifts down to the earth. These might be precious amber or golden tools, they might be garments or ornaments, not presents in the modern sense, but symbolic of the belief that warmth, fertility, and luck all flow from the sun at the very moment when the world feels darkest. Saule reassured people that the darkness, however heavy, would not last. The sun would rise again. The earliest written evidence for Saule comes from 1326 AD, but the Proto-Baltic traditions behind her likely formed between 1000 and 1500 BC. You'll already see some degree of overlap with the Roman festivals we discussed earlier, but in India we also find the Vedic sun goddess Surya, who also rode a golden chariot across the sky. Scholars believe that the existence of all these overlapping myths, continents apart, indicate an ancestor goddess from Proto-Indo-European myth. This means that Santa Claus's flying sleigh may well have origins that are 5,500 years old. The Reindeer Mother, Beaivi, and Saule are not only the clearest ancestors of flying reindeer carrying precious cargo across the night sky, but together with Yule, they reveal the oldest emotional touchstones of midwinter. Long before anybody told a story about a gift-giving bishop in red robes, northern peoples had already filled the season with ideas that we still think of today as the spirit of Christmas. Warmth in the cold, hope and light returning to a dark world, the protection of the weak through community, generosity and goodwill, and the promise of renewal, that the year will turn and life will go on. The later Christian story of St. Nicholas didn't invent these themes. He was grafted onto ideas that all have their roots in ancient pagan winter festivals that predate Christianity by centuries. Whatever stories were later layered over it, Christmas was, and in many ways still is, a festival of the sun. By around 1000 AD, Christianity had become the dominant religion across Europe, and as such the symbolism surrounding the festival had become, officially at least, heavily Christianized, with nativity scenes becoming the most recognizable Christmas imagery. So, what happened? How did all this give way back to the ancient symbols and imagery that we know Christmas for today? Ironically, St. Nicholas himself may have to shoulder some of the blame. His generosity and gift-giving and his reputation as a wonder worker may well have opened the door for the old myths and traditions to creep back in. Not only did his generosity match the season's long-standing themes of protection and goodwill, but Catholic Europe depicted him in red bishop's robes, which, coincidentally, matched solar colours of renewal, and these survive today in Santa's jolly suit. No, Santa was not originally green and turned red by Coca-Cola. 17th to 19th century English illustrations show him in many colours: green, blue, red, brown, yellow, you name it. Even multiple colours at the same time, but red was always there from the beginning. When the cult of St. Nicholas spread north, people simply mapped him onto the emotional world that they already knew. By the 1500s, he began to appear as Santa Claus in the Netherlands, which, apart from some rather regrettable additions that have later been correctly dropped, is where the imagery of the modern Santa Claus begins to take a far more familiar shape. But the sleigh full of precious gifts, the night journey, the cosmic reindeer, they'd always been there, enduring symbols of Saule, Beaivi and the Reindeer Mother, and the cosmic Solstice journey. St. Nicholas, who was presumably intended to replace these myths, found himself absorbed by stories that had been running for thousands of years before him. Little things changed over the years, of course, but the birth of modern Christmas is often cited as Clement Clarke Moore's 1823 poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas. You know the poem. "'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse," and so on. But this was not a birth so much as a revival. Moore's poem expertly knitted the Christian myth and the ancient sun festivals so tightly together that people forgot the scene was ever there in the first place. It all just worked. The kindly bishop became the sky-travelling gift-giver that preceded him. His sleigh and his precious cargo drew upon the chariot of the returning sun. His reindeer sprang from the cosmic herd, and his nighttime journey echoed the ancient path of the old solar goddesses through the winter sky. This is why the modern Santa feels so familiar, so instinctively at home in Midwinter, because he's robed in ideas that are truly ancient, deeply, universally human, ideas that are woven through every part of the festival, symbolically, ritually, and emotionally. Despite its religious dominance throughout Europe, Christian Christmas never managed to replace these ancient winter myths. Instead, it simply settled on top of them like a thin layer of snow. And although the Christian story of Christmas was the one that people told for hundreds of years, it was only ever a small part of a much longer tale. These solstice festivals were too ancient, too meaningful, too emotionally necessary to be pushed completely aside. And even though we don't give these older festivals any credit, their link to our psyches is so strong that they don't need us to. The older pagan message of the winter solstice is still the dominant, defining emotional core of Christmas, and it probably always will be. The secular Christmas that we celebrate today is in fact an ancient and evolving midwinter festival that predates every current religion on earth. It has outlived gods, cultures, empires, monarchies and markets. It's absorbed everything that's been put into it: Roman politics, Christian theology, Victorian sentiment, and rampant consumerism. And still, its emotional core remains the same. Light in the darkness, warmth in the cold, generosity amid scarcity. It's about becoming kinder, more open, more human. It is the annual renewal of our better selves, a reminder that with the smallest act of kindness, the world can be mended a little, that hearts can thaw, and that there is no night so long or so cold that we cannot outlast it together. So while people may complain that the true meaning of Christmas has been lost, or that its spirit has been packaged up and sold by retailers, I don't think that's true. In fact, I'm not sure it's even possible. Because despite religious attempts to claim it, and capitalist attempts to sell it, the essence of Christmas can't be bottled or packaged up. Because ultimately, it's a feeling hiding in small, private moments. It's the cozy joy of wrapping up warm before venturing out into the cold. And it's the long journey home through frozen streets, knowing that a warm house and familiar faces are waiting at the end of it. It's the first flakes of snow and the hope that it will stick. It's the patterns of frost upon the window pane and the warm twinkling glow of the tree lit behind it. It's in the old stories retold by the fire, in the scent of pine and mulled wine and mince pies drifting through the room. It's the wide-eyed smiles of children too excited to sleep. It's a brief, blessed moment when, despite being dark and cold and dead, the world feels softened, quiet, and at peace. And so do we. Christmas doesn't belong to one religion. It belongs to everyone. Wherever you are, whoever you are, and whether you're religious or not. We're all part of its story. A story older than cities, older than nations, a story as old as the worship of the sun. A story that asks us to look into the world at its darkest moment and to bring into it a little more light. Thank you for watching this video. I did say at the beginning that I had some presents coming your way, and if you want a quick tease as to what they are, then click the link in my pinned comment to see what's coming up for the Old World in 2026. I also want to say a big thank you to my channel members and patrons, and especially to Tash and to Carolyn, to Sophie, Eileen and Serafina, who've been supporting me on Patreon since the very beginning. I can't thank you all enough for your support. Without patron support, I couldn't afford to keep doing what I do, so I really do mean it when I say your support does mean the world. If you do want to join them in supporting me on Patreon, then there's a link in the description. You'll get regular exclusive videos you can't watch anywhere else, access to our Discord server, and of course, ad-free access to everything you see on this channel and on Myths of the Old World, which is coming very soon. Again, check the pinned comment to find out more. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas, and I'll see you in the new year with more beasts and more myths from the Old World.